we're being recorded, just in case you didn't hear that, with Nobutaka, who's a professor in, I guess, political theory at Osaka University, and perhaps will be followed in order by Kei Yamamoto, who's in law at Ritsumeikan in Japan. And then Yasmeen Daifallah, who's in government, political theorist as well, at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And last, with the cherry on the cake, is Kang, who's in, I'm going to say, English languages, given the global nature of this, and literature, at Seoul National University, and then we'll give Nobu a chance to respond briefly, and then open it up to a general discussion both among the panelists and those of you who follow the argument. So Nobu, why don't you go ahead, and we'll just take it where it goes. Thanks very much.
Let me share. Wait, I can't. Wait. Okay. Sorry. I just wonder if I.
Yeah, we can see you.
No, I'm just wondering if I can share my slide.
Ah.
It seems like I need to change the configuration.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a problem. I'm going to send Hanjun an email with my slide, and but my slide is quite simple, and I can start without it. So just in case, let me send.
Yeah, in order to share your slide, you have to go out of this session and re-enter it.
Yeah.
And change your settings.
I'm sorry for the trouble. So Hanjun, I sent you an email with my slide. Could you share it, or could you just upload
Okay, I'm
it?
still waiting for the email to come.
Yes. I hope it won't take so much time.
I want to begin just by giving a quick overview, and then we can...
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe I can start. Oh, thank you very much. Finally. Okay, so Hanjun, could you change it to the second one? Oh, the second one. Oh, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank Asia Theories Network and Hanjun for organizing this event. And I also thank David, Kei, Yasmeen, Woosung for joining the panel. And I'm also grateful for the audience for attending this event from, it seems like you are from US, Hong Kong, Korea, and Japan. As a first speaker, I would like to start with offering my take on stupidity by summarizing my book, Stupidity in Politics. The search of stupidity seems one of the most observable characteristics in current politics. We often describe the rise of populism, unending wars in Middle East and Ukraine, as scientific reactions to the pandemic as stupid. However, when we turn to the academic world, we find little studies on stupidity. Instead of tackling stupidity, current scholarship seems to address those phenomena like the pandemic or the populism by two ways. First, there are theoretical and empirical analyses of specific phenomena underlying our current turmoil, which we find stupid. These phenomena may include echo chamber, partisanship, or our susceptibility to misinformation, and so on. In so doing, they try to identify the causes of the stupid phenomena in the hope of getting rid of them. Second, political theorists attempt to secure the sound and correct reasoning against bad and incorrect reasoning. These attempts include, for example, the pursuit of epistocracy, where only those who have sufficient knowledge and reasoning skills can join politics, and epistemic democracy, which tries to secure the legitimate procedure for democratic decision-making. In other words, the current scholarship tries to identify what appears to be stupid and replace them with secure and sound judgment. My book, however, differs from the current scholarship and tries to focus on the very structure of stupidity. In so doing, I focus on two characteristics of stupidity, namely unavoidability and potential. So please move to the next slide. Thank you. First, let me start with the unavoidability of stupidity. By unavoidability, I mean that we can never be free from stupidity. This is because stupidity is an elusive phenomenon. Certainly, we can reveal some characteristics of stupidity by telling what it is not. For example, stupidity is not an error or irrationality. Stupidity may contain them, but it can never be reduced to them. And it is possible that we remain stupid even when we are correct and rational. Indeed, stupidity is everywhere. We call some politicians as being stupid, and elites might call the masses stupid. But it is not only them who are stupid. We ourselves are prone to stupidity as well. And rationality and reasonableness often do not save us from becoming stupid. In fact, it seems that one of the gravest dangers lies in assuming we can demarcate, identify, and do away with stupidity. We let our guards down when we feel like we identified a problem and assumed that the problem is solvable. As soon as we start to demarcate stupidity, we lose the initial sense of the awareness of being stupid. We tend to think, okay, I was stupid in this and that way, but I am no longer stupid. This is an example of identifying and assuming that once you learn from that mistake, you won't be stupid again. Or another instance of how demarcation results in our losing awareness is when we say that others are stupid, because this implies that we are not, that we are safe from being stupid. Indeed, it is our common wisdom that the most stupid person is the one who thinks themselves as not stupid. So, stupidity is unavoidable. But why stupidity is unavoidable? I discuss it in detail in the first chapter of the book by analyzing Deleuze's remark on stupidity in difference and repetition. So here, let me simply restate the theoretical claim of the first chapter of my book. We become stupid because our thinking is permitted with thinking of others. Western philosophy has long assumed that thinking is a solitary activity held outside the world of plural actors. This is not true. Indeed, at the very instance when we have our own ideas, we end up repeating the ideas of others. This intrusion of others into our thinking also explains why cliché is a central symptom of stupidity, which is an important phenomenon discussed in my book. Then, could you move to the next slide? Thank you very much. Next, I want to talk about the other characteristic, that is, the potential of stupidity. The unavoidability of stupidity at first seems to threaten our democracy. If people are susceptible to stupid ideas and actions, the rule by people may simply bring bad politics. And this is the claim often made by authoritarian leaders. In fact, the unavoidability of stupidity can sustain and even vivify our democracy. It does so in two ways. First, contrary to the authoritarians' claim that people are too stupid to rule, the unavoidability of stupidity gives us a good reason to choose democracy over other regimes. If nobody is free from stupidity, it is safer not to let political leaders keep ruling without checks and balances. Second, and more importantly, stupidity helps us to sustain our democracy by its potential of giving birth to reflections. When we encounter stupid actions and words of others, and when we realize our own stupid acts, we often become stupefied. On the one hand, such stupefaction can lead us into silence and inaction. But on the other hand, it can drive us into new reflection. In other words, stupidity drives us into thinking, drives us into seeing our ideas and actions in a new light. Surely, as I said earlier, these new reflections can easily return to stupidity as soon as we assume we are no longer stupid. Nevertheless, we can also say that these reflections can help us enrich our political communities and better tackle problems we face by evincing new perspectives. And democracy can make the best of this stupefying force of stupidity with free circulation of opinions that enhances our encounters with stupidity. So, next slide, please. Thank you. So, these are the two central claims of my book and my take on stupidity. With the remaining time, I hope I can have another couple of minutes. With the remaining time, let me briefly explain the structure of the book. The first chapter challenges the enduring assumption that stupidity is a quality which is to be eliminated out of the political discourse by drawing extensively on Gilles Deleuze's difference and repetition. So the first chapter elucidates the indispensability of stupidity in our politics and thinking. The second chapter, Tracing, offers a historical account of how the rise of modern democracy intensifies the problematic of stupidity through engaging with writings of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Stuart Mill, Alexis de Tocqueville, and Gustave Flaubert. Then the third and fourth chapters explore how to address the problem of stupidity. The third chapter does so by examining how Immanuel Kant, at the inception of a democratic period, sought to deal with the problematic character of thinking, and thus dealing with stupidity. My interpretation, however, reveals that Kant does not succeed in pushing such orientation to its logical end. Rather, Kant externalizes stupidity from thinking. The fourth chapter looks for other ways of political theorizing that can better negotiate stupidity. While the previous examination has focused on the problem of stupidity in the West, this chapter acknowledges that this is a problem beyond the West by attending to the writings of Japanese thinker in the mid-20th century, namely Hideo Kobayashi. Kobayashi's perspective is of relevance because, in contrast to the Kantian missing of stupidity, he proposes that we embrace our problematic thinking and become stupid. In conclusion, I address a mode of political theorizing that acknowledges the potential of stupidity, drawing upon the method of dramatization which Thurs developed for philosophy. By probing into the reality of our thinking activity, dramatization of stupidity delineates the actual process where new ideas emerge out of our ordinary activity, which is a crucial element that inspires democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nobi. That was great. Very good summary of the book and the argument through it. Kai Yamamoto will pick up here and begin the kind of critical reading and response. So Kai, you're on.
Okay, so let me share my slide. It's okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, okay. Hello, my name is Kei Yamamoto from Ritsumeikan University in Japan. I'm studying about political theory, radical democracy, and discourse theory, and so on. First, I want to say thank you so much for the invitation to this very exciting workshop today. I enjoyed reading Nobutaka Otobe's book very much. I found this book very stimulating and unique. And I totally agree with Otobe's arguments. So I want to keep talking much more fascinating points of this book, but today I have only 10 minutes. So I have to ask very quickly 3 points in my time. Yeah. Let me summarize Otobe's argument a little bit. In this book, Otobe challenges a very strict and traditional distinction between thinking and politics. Because of this distinction, theorists or political theorists, philosophers, and so on, have dismissed the fact that there is also unavoidably a stupidity in thinking. According to Otobe, a cross-examination of the stupidity of thinking reveals that it is not a solitary activity, but a democratic activity. Then he insists on plurality as a condition of thinking. In other words, thinking arises from our plurality in our world. This is a very clear argument, and I agree with Otobe's points. But based on these assumptions, I would like to ask 3 questions from here. First, I want to suggest that we have to distinguish 2 types of stupidities. First, stupidity, of course, stupidity in politics. This is the title of this book. Otobe says in his introduction and the first paragraph and the first sentences, he says, stupidity permeates political life. We frequently accuse politicians bureaucrats, journalists, voters, elites, and the masses of stupidity. And of course, we all know how stupid our own government or politicians are. I don't know how it is in your country, but it is definitely true, at least in Japan. However, according to Otobe, the stupidity of thinking is that of cliché. Otobe finds in it otherness and plurality. And he tries to find commonality between thinking and politics. And he tries to overcome a strict distinction between them. But my question is, are these two types of stupidity the same thing? Isn't the stupidity in politics much more serious? It seems no plurality, no otherness in stupidity in politics. This is quite different. It could be quite different conceptions of stupidities in these two types of stupidities, okay? This is my first question. And my second question is about cliché. Otobe tries to derive the plurality of thinking and the democratic significance in his book. According to him, cliché drives us into a novel thinking and novel reflections, and it reveals that there is a plural dimension in our thinking. But my point is, a cliché is cliché. That means, I would say, even if I speak the cliché, can we speak about democracy from here? Is it the other coming from the cliché could be also the authoritarian other. Cliché is also the language of the other, but I'm not convinced why it is connected to democracy. It can be a more tyrannical something, not democracy, but the more tyrannical something. This is my second question. How can we introduce, how can we derive the democratic significance from the cliché? This is my second question. And my final question is, I would say the final question very quickly. Otobe connects stupidity to the political. Of course, needless to say, the political has been an important subject for political theory in 20th centuries. Otobe defines this very multi-layered concept as plurality in an Arendtian way. However, various thinkers like Carl Schmitt, Arendt, and Leclerc, and Mouffe, and so on, very many thinkers have referred to this concept. So, I want to ask, can we articulate Otobe's idea of stupidity into other traditions about the political? For example, can we say stupidity may inspire friend-enemy relations, or it reveals the contingency of the society? This is the question about the political and the character of the political. Okay, that's three questions are all. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. That was really terrific and a good provocation to get us going. Yasmeen Daifallah will follow now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this workshop and to get this opportunity, and really honored to engage with Otobe's book. Congratulations on publishing it. As somebody who's trying to publish her first book, I'm always inspired and particularly impressed with everybody who's done it. So congratulations. All right. Let me start my remarks. I really appreciated Otobe's evocative and insightful intervention on the concept, or as he puts it, the problematic of stupidity in relation to politics. As is often the case with such remarks, like my own, they tend to be more about how texts speak to us rather than what they actually say, how they resonate with our own questions and anxieties about politics and theory, rather than or in addition to the anxieties that drive and animate them. So it's just with this disclaimer that I start my thoughts on the many insights and provocations that stupidity in politics offers us. Otobe prompts us to take stupidity seriously, a commonplace attribute of many, if not most, of our sense of political decisions all over the world. We have a tendency to briskly dismiss stupidity as a sign of something else: political or intellectual incompetence, rashness, or an unjustified certainty that everything will turn out fine when all evidence points to the contrary. When we see it that way, as we often do, stupidity seems like a hollow term, a signifier that has no signified, but that requires a set of other signifiers for it to make sense. We fall into similar confusion when we attempt to define stupidity. As Otobe astutely points out in the introduction, stupidity is both ubiquitous, everywhere to be seen, and elusive, escaping attempts to pin it down in an all-encompassing definition. On the one hand, for example, stupidity's etymology points to its origin in the Latin stupere, to be amazed or stunned, to be in a state of wonder, as Kant has it in Otobe's telling. On the other hand, the nearly 80 synonyms that the Merriam-Webster definition of stupid provides us all point to a sense of intellectual or social inadequacy. So Otobe's first lesson to us, by way of Deleuze and Arendt, is that stupidity is political, not in the sense that it's an attribute of a certain decision or the quality of a leader or a bureaucrat, a Trump or an Eichmann. Rather, it is political in the sense that it can be a collective mode of behavior, a mode of behavior connoted by the thoughtlessness of Eichmann's response during the trials, or, quote, the use of stock phrases or cliches to explain almost anything. Recent examples would include explaining the pandemic, political failure by conspiracies, economic failure by inherited debt, etc. In addition, and here I'm extrapolating Otobe's interpretation a little bit, so Otobe, please feel free to come back and write, correct me if I'm wrong. If we consider stupidity as a collective orientation, we cannot see it as inherent to a certain individual or group. Like other political qualities, loyalty, passiveness, participation, solidarity, stupidity becomes a result of a set of discourses and practices that cultivated in specific locations and historical periods. I will return to this point with... Sorry, I think somebody... Okay, I will come back to this point towards the end of my remarks. I'll circle back to it just to kind of push on it a little bit or probe it a little further. I'm sorry, I think there's some background noise on my end. I don't know if you can hear it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not really bothersome.
Oh, okay. Okay. So against the two tendencies of locating the source of stupidity outside itself, like of rationalizing it as a sign of something else, a symptom of a political or intellectual illness, so that's one tendency, or the other tendency of being lost in the potentially opposing directions of stupor and stupid, Otobe encourages us to consider stupidity as a problematic in its own right. It is a problematic, moreover, that is necessarily associated with the activity of thinking and the activity of politics, or perhaps to put it succinctly and reductively, I'm sure, of thinking politically. quote, stupidity appearing as cliches is possible by virtue of thinking itself. While we all believe that we are independent thinkers, Otobe tells us, Otobe takes us in a journey spanning Kant, Deleuze, and Flaubert, at which end we realize that cliches become cliches because people as individuals, as independent thinking eyes, and I quote, utter them as if they are the expressions of their own independent opinions or thought, when they're in fact a product of a collective process or the other person's intrusion, right? It's a sign, Yet thinking, it seems, requires or relies on such stock phrases, received ideas, or cliches. The production of such cliches, i.e. of stupidity, is another sign of its political quality or political character. Cliches are a product of, quote, intrusion of the other or others in the generation of our own ideas. To acknowledge stupidity then as inherent to our thought process and as a shared quality is to imbue politics with a humility and egalitarianism that it often lacks. Okay, so the questions I'd like to posit to Otobe stem from this set of observations that he insightfully gives us about the indigenous character, or endogenous, sorry, not indigenous, endogenous, like inherent character of stupidity, i.e. of understanding stupidity as a constituent and inescapable part of the way we think and the way we think about politics. The string of questions I pose could be framed by a general one. What would happen, I ask, if we exogenized stupidity, if only a little? To put it slightly differently, what would an analysis of stupidity that sees it as an effect of a set of political, cultural, social, economic, representational practices look like? What happens if we took seriously the cue that Deleuze, Flaubert, Arendt seem to give us in different ways, namely that stupidity or thoughtlessness, from Arendt's perspective, is a result of the fact that thinking and feeling are always situated. Now, I do not mean to imply that stupidity or thinking as a whole can be reduced to where we were born and brought up, which class, race, gender we belong to, if we are in the global north or south, colonizers or colonized, disabled or able-bodied. Rather, what I mean is to ask, what would it mean that our thinking cannot be considered outside the way we think, and therefore the ways we don't think, or the way we think with stupidity or stupidly, cannot be thought outside these webs of being in the world through which and in which we learn how to think, or not. I'd like to end here with a scene that political theorist Timothy Mitchell paints us so vividly in his Colonizing Egypt, and which captured for me some of the resonances that came up as I read through Otobe's argument in this book, especially on the duo of stupid, stupefy, with which you beautifully start the text. Mitchell describes for us the imagined impressions of 4 Egyptians who are sent, an Egyptian delegation of 4 Egyptian scholars, who are sent to attend the World Exhibition held in Paris in 1889. At that point, this delegation, those Egyptians, were newly colonized by the Brits, and before that by the French. The delegation went to check out the Egyptian chamber in the exhibition. There, they found, a very elaborate setup with supposedly, an Egyptian alley, a facade of a mosque, belly dancers, dervishes, and 50 donkeys imported from Egypt specifically for the occasion. They were disgusted and embarrassed, Timothy Mitchell tells us. The Egyptian chamber, which was accurate, so accurate, such that even they remark the paint was made dirty and peeling in order to accurately represent what Egypt looked like at the time. And the Egyptian chamber portrayed Egyptians as stupid and base. Worse, while there, these Egyptian scholars themselves felt like an exhibit, gazed at, stared at, and examined as though they were also one of the artifacts. What stupefied European visitors to the exhibition, what put them in a state of awe and wonder, stupidized its Egyptian visitors. And it is maybe through this double take, maybe, or double meaning of and the many meanings perhaps that stupid could imply, that I would like to kind of conclude my remarks. Specifically, I would like to ask, if we take that insight seriously, or if we take that resonance seriously, could we then talk about stupidities rather than stupidity? Stupidity as internal to thought, but as always and necessarily situated. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Yasmeen. Also terrific comments. And we have a couple of different themes developing over here. I mean, obviously the focus on cliches, the focus on the pluralities of stupidity and how that might be folded into an account of stupidity in and as political as politics. Woosung Kang will now take over and give us the last set of remarks before going back to Nobu. Thanks.
Thank you. This is really wonderful occasion in the middle of winter break, and then I was in the countryside. You know, I recently bought a new house, and I'm still making it like a home, and lots of things to do. But in the while, but meanwhile, I'm really happy to join lots of friends who really long to see, but you know, could not see because of this pandemic and things like that. And it was really happy to read Otobe's book once again. I'm really happy that I contributed a little bit when he thinks about writing this book, and I have a little bit about you know, the purpose of this book. And I really like to talk about, you know, I have lots of things to say, but when I'm reading it, I really focus on three things that I'd like to share with you, and I ask the idea of what Nobutaka think about these ideas. So I little bit share my yeah, I don't find. Okay. Can you see my?
It's wide. I mean, there's something there. I think if you scroll down, you should be able to.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry. It's really new for me. It's not easy to. Okay. I'm so accustomed to the Zoom meeting, so it's not easy for me to adjust to this WebEx. Okay, I'll just go with you know, it's just one page slide for me to show you that referring you know, I'm really impressed by, you know, the Yasmeen's questions and you know, the problematizing the Otobe's idea of stupidity as politics and thinking of politics. The one thing that I'd like to ask and you know, think to myself is that, you know, I was, as you know, the Korean translator of Avital Loner's book Stupidity. It's a, you know, this huge and massive book about stupidity that, you know, she talks about everything about, from Deleuze to Musil and everyone in literature in Western society. And she gathers almost everything about stupidity and the relevant thinkings about stupidity, and I was really had difficulty, understanding her book itself, the Arbiter Owner's book, and I really like to hear about your reaction to Ronner's book, and especially I remember that one time she talks about this what she calls the transcendental structure of stupidity that was inherent, not endogenous, but inherent in Western thinking. I mean, this is really interesting concept, but it cannot be easily conceptualized. At least I think there's two possibilities to understand what she meant by this the transcendental structure of stupidity. You can think that this transcendental structure is is something that beyond this conundrum of stupidity and thinking or political thinking that makes this two kind of this binary opposition or this contradictory relationship between thinking and stupidity as a kind of phenomenological way of representation of thinking. So this is kind of transcend even the relation between stupidity and thinking, and makes this relation possible as well as impossible. And that is what as I understand it, the one meaning of this transcendental structure of stupidity by Ronner. And the other one is that it's a little bit like your Nobutaka's idea of endogenous character of indispensability of stupidity within thinking. That this transcendental structure of stupidity is the way this stupidity as kind of a Derridian supplement or supplement, that debilitate as well as make possible the idea of thinking that we or the Western philosophy have thinking about the definition of what is called thinking and things like that. So this is this latter part of definition can lead to some kind of critique of ideology. So this transcendental structure of stupidity is itself problematic, as you said in your book. So I'd really like to hear about your idea, your take on the Ronner's the concept of the transcendental structure of stupidity. That's one question. And yeah, everybody else, like everybody else, I'd like to talk about the cliche. And yeah, it's a really interesting idea. And I remember that we talked about this, your idea of cliche in Seoul a few years back when we talk about the ATN series network, and you specifically mentioned the Deleuze's idea of stupidity and his take on idiocy, right? Yeah, in the middle of chapter 1 or something like that. I couldn't remember it, but the idiocy is as Deleuze think and as well as you mentioned that idiocy is a little bit different from the stupidity that you mentioned all along your book, right? Yeah, it is because as Deleuze talk about it, there's the idiocy, like the Mishkin in the Idiot, Dostoevsky's Idiot, or the as you mentioned the Barbie in Melville's work, seems like they are the one who does not represent themselves with the cliche word. Yeah, indeed, they are the one who does not use cliche, or they resist using cliche phrases, and that's their characteristics as some kind of alternative subjectivity that these the literary writers talk about, and their non-cliche responsibility as idiot, but they are not really the idiot or stupid person. And this can be conceptualized as a new subjectivity or political subjectivity that we can think about in the modern society. So I'd like to I'm wondering what would you think about this this political aspect of idiocy rather than stupidity that keep resisting against the cliche and stop praising. Yeah, and then the third one is a little bit tricky, but it's not that. It's about Arendt, yeah, and the thoughtlessness. Yeah. Recently, I wrote something about Arendt's idea of the Daifallah in Jerusalem and a take of thoughtlessness, the sheer thoughtlessness of Daifallah. What is very interesting is that she the idea of her thoughtlessness is not that really relevant to the your take on stupidity, but it's rather more contingent upon the situation that she thinks that for me, at least for me, that she thinks Nahiman is much more a person who does not use his reason, his way of thinking publicly. So for me, that the Arendt's take of sheer thoughtlessness is much more relevant with Kant's idea of enlightenment. That the small essay that written by Kant, that Kant said that everybody like to use their reason, but most of them use their reason as a private way. They just do what was written or what was prescribed without thinking the whole picture of synthetic ideas. Whereas the leaders or political figures and the people who are very wise people try to use the reason as publicly. They picture the whole situation and the possible outcomes and things like that. So what do you think that the Arendt's idea of thoughtlessness is much more closely related to the constant division between the private use of reason and the public use of reason, which is based on his idea of enlightenment? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Woosung. Also really interesting. Let me just add one little small question. I mean, it's not really well formulated, but it was prompted by not so much a point that Woosung was making, but his introduction about not seeing each other through the pandemic. And it made me think that there is a distinction to be drawn between stupidity and or as politics, and the mobilization of stupidity as politics, right? The sort of taking it up in order to effect a kind of set of political ends or a tableau of the political that favors the person positioning themselves in that way, or a party positioning itself in that way. And I think of the pandemic, right? The political gets, or stupidity even gets mobilized in relation to the politics of the pandemic in order to affect certain political outcomes. So that it's a kind of instrumentalization of stupidity, as a standing apart from it and using it to affect certain ends. I'll leave it at that. So why don't you respond to the set of portraits you have in front of you briefly, and then we'll open it up to everybody else.
Can I start? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kei, Yasmeen, Woosung, David, for your questions. They are all quite insightful and very difficult to respond. And I find some of your questions overlap with each other, but my brain is not still working in the morning, and so instead of grouping those questions, let me respond to your question respectively. So first, about Kei's question. Maybe Kei and I discussed about our take on the political theory for so much time, for so long. I think we know with each other so well, and he knows so much about weak points in my thinking. So it is very difficult to respond to Kei's question, but they are all important. So let me deflate your questions. The first one is concerning the difference or the subcategories of stupidity. So we have a broad range of stupidities, stupid phenomena, and we find some in politics, but not all stupid phenomenon concern our formal political arena. And for example, I made stupid comments on my daughter last night when I was nervous about this event. So that's another way of making stupid things. And it's not political as such. So and that's true. Now, we have now several dimensions of stupidity. And we do have, how to put it, some phenomena of stupidity concern politics more directly, while others may not appear so much in politics. And I tend to so the purpose of my book, and when I was writing in that book, I was trying to somehow build a more general theory. It's not maybe a good word, but I think I was trying to build up a general theory of stupidity as as something which are so common to our politics and thinking, and the result is that I tend to overgeneralize broad range of phenomena. So I think Kei is right in pointing out this tendency of overgeneralization. But however, when I say that stupidity concerns both thinking and the political. I use the word political in a very broad sense. So the political in this book means that something concerning plural actors, and not even plural individuals, some plural subjectivities or dissonances in our subjectivities. So I think I actually drew upon Bill Connery's word radical plurality in defining my take on the political. So how should I say, to sum up, okay, you are right that we need to differentiate several dimensions and several characteristics of the stupidity in our several corners of our life. But as a general claim, if we understand politics as concerning our plurality, still I think we can have a certain coherent or to some extent general theory of stupidity. So I think that would respond to your first question and also the third question about the political question of the political. So let me add a little bit about my response to your third question. So your question concerns what is my understanding of the political. And so my simple answer is that it concerns radical plurality. And by radical plurality, I mean that a plurality that is with even beyond the appearance of a single subject. We tend to have dissonant ideas within our subjectivities. That has something to do with our plurality in this world. I mean, the plurality of actors. So that is my take on the political. And let me return to your second question. You asked me if cliché can really verify us into democracy, or is it possible that we realize that we use cliché and start trying not to use cliché anymore? Yes, this is also a difficult question. I do agree that to dissociate ourselves from using any more cliché requires certain mindset, certain preparedness, or certain ethos on our on us. So in other words, we need to be attentive to tackle stupidity and cliché. But I also think it is often the case that such attentiveness, such our awareness that we should not use cliché and we should think by ourselves and think have our own original ideas, ironically produce our use of clichés. So I think in my book I use the word Janus-faced or dual forces of cliché. So we cannot actually distinguish our originality from cliché. So it's more like it can be a vicious cycle, but it can also become a more productive cycle. So to be original, we need to use the cliché, but that moment of realizing our use of cliché can free us from using cliché. So let me move to Yasmeen's question, and thank you very much for developing my my inaccurate ideas in a better way. Actually, I find some of your remarks. I think you read better than I do my text. I thought, well, I said something so good, and which I didn't realize. So thank you very much. And
it's because you write so well that I write you well.
And about your question, I think your question about endogeneity or the endogeneity of the stupidity and the need to exogenize stupidity is quite correct, and I think it has something to do with Kei's claim about about the need to distinguish several modes of stupidities. And yes, you are right. So here again, I must admit that I tend to focus too much on the general theory of stupidity rather than how in specific moment and specific time stupidity can how to put it, function in our political thinking. So and so I cannot. I don't have so much to respond, and you are very correct. But one thing I can say is that I think when I was preparing this book, what concerned me rather is that political theorists and scientists tend to focus so much on specific stupidities rather than the underlying structure of stupidity. All these observations on a stupid phenomenon and or stupidities are very productive and insightful, but also we tend to lose track of our susceptibility to stupidity. So that's the reason I tend to focus so much on general theory of stupidity. But I think, there's so much need to unpack their general theory and turn our eyes to multiple modes where stupidity is served in our politics. Then let me move to Ulsan's comment. Yes, they are all difficult. The first one concerns Lonell's take on stupidity, and namely in the transcendental structure of stupidity. So I have exactly the same impression about Lonell's book. When I started, well, the first book I read about stupidity was Lonell's book. So when I decided to write a book on stupidity, somebody told me that Avital Lonell published a book on stupidity, and I went down to the library and checked it out and started reading. And I was so much hooked by the book on the first day. On the second day, I found it quite difficult. On the third day, I lost the track of how to understand the book. Well, still, the book is very important. I think that it's one of the most important book on the topic. And I actually owe much to her take on the transcendental structure of stupidity, I think. Actually, when I was writing on endogenous character of stupidity, I think I almost forgot about her take on the transcendental structure of stupidity. And how to put it? Yes, we can say that stupidity is like a supplement in a Derridian sense that it returns whenever we think we don't need it. We can do away with it. It returns like as a supplement because it is actually inside our thinking. So I think, of course, I don't agree all of the Lonell's take on stupidity, and I cannot overgeneralize the similarity between Derrida's take on supplement and rules on thinking, but I think they all point to the endogenous character of thinking.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is that, the Roller's idea of transcendentality of stupidity is double-edged. That, as you mentioned, that we are within, in every way, in every possible way, we are inevitably within the structure of stupidity that makes thinking possible. But at the same time, she seems to suggest that we are out of this stupidity, that there's something, beyond this stupidity structured something that we're beyond, that makes this stupidity and thinking possible, and at the same time make impossible. So this in the latter sense, the transcendental is not actually transcendental. Is something that cannot be represented or cannot be articulated, but still there within the structure of system or something like that. Yeah.
Isn't it the case that to think about, even critically about stupidity, requires both being inside and outside of it. So it's both
Mhm.
transcendental and the capacity to stand outside of it in order to look at it. It's sort of doubly structured in exactly that kind of way.
Thank you. I think that point concerns the difference between stupidity and idiocy, I think. So towards the end of her book, I think Lonero speaks more about idiocy as a certain positive quality vis-a-vis stupidity. And also, as you Usan said, Deleuze talks a lot about idiocy in his writing on Bartleby, and also his writing on in What is Philosophy. So, and also, so how to put it? Let me restate. So, some thinkers, including Deleuze and Lonel, find some positive antidote to stupidity in idiocy. According to, I think Deleuze said something like, idiot is a man without presumptions. And idiots or Bartleby make his own cliche instead of using others' words. And I think George Agamben pushes this orientation further by saying that Bartleby represents the pure power of potentiality. So according to Agamben, Bartleby never uses the words of others, but stick to the pure potentiality. And by virtue of it, he is free from all the social forces. And
yeah, but Barnaby is the one who uses stock races. I would prefer that too, repeatedly and compulsively without using any any other expressions. That makes the lawyer embarrassed, right? But for me, the Barnaby, it's not exactly matching with the idiot or idiocy of Deleuze and any other philosophers, but rather if I may say that Billy Bird or rather than Bartleby is more akin to the the example of idiocy rather than Bartleby. Yeah, how do you like that?
That's a good question and a very difficult.
Yeah, he keeps saying
Very difficult to answer,
I
but,
would prefer that too. Yeah, that's cliche, right?
Yeah, but so this I cannot respond well to your point, but two things come up to my mind. First, I am more skeptical about Agamben's take on Bartleby, or even Drew's take on Bartleby. Actually, for example, Bartleby itself, I prefer not to. The phrase becomes actually in a cliche in a contemporary theoretical jargons, right? So I wonder if Bartleby truly contains or produces pure power of thought. It is also susceptible to the mechanism of stupidity. And my second response is that about Billy Bird. Billy, I remember in Arendt, I think somewhere in on Revolution, said Billy Bird is not a political person. So actually, I'm not sure if Billy represents a certain positive way of dealing with our political situation. So Arendt said that Billy is not political because he doesn't have a word.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's exactly what I mean. That I don't know there's any linguistic connections between the stupidity and stuttering.
Mhm.
He cannot say, he cannot articulate what he thinks and what his situation is when he confronted with this, this legal figures, and he does not advocate himself, in front of this court. So it's kind of stuttering or stammering, which remotely I think links to stupidity, but it's not exactly what you mean by stupidity, but more like into the idiocy, right?
Yes. Yes. I think the Billy's situation. Yes.
So I was going to try to open it up, so get other people involved, and you can respond, carry on the
Yeah,
conversation.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Super interesting. So questions, comments, engagements, critique from others who are identifiable only by name and not by image. Anybody want to say anything? They've all gone to sleep. Yeah, go ahead, Satofumi Kawamura.
Show your face.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, everybody should like
where's
that.
the Oscar?
Very relaxed style now, so I'm very afraid. I've been reluctant to show myself. But thank you very much for the great presentation and the great comments, and I really enjoyed. And I just my question might be a bit deviated from that out of the discussion, but this is kind of my, how to say, it's kind of no question, kind of comment, or I want to know that I want to get Otobe-san's Nobutaka's the idea about so when I the way I'm listening to the, so I'm sorry that I didn't read your book so detailed, so maybe this, and then this my comment might be out of the point, but so when I as far as I understand your discussions, I feel somehow that your talk is very, it's kind of similar to Tanabe Hajime's discussion of the philosophy of metanoesis, so Zangedo no Tetsuyaku. So because so Tanabe Hajime is a very it's kind of notorious philosopher in Japan, and then he write the essay titled "The Metanoesis of Philosophy of Metanoesis," and then in that essay he tried to kind of stupidize the whole Japanese, and then so whole Japanese is so whole Japanese should do the metanoetic, the metanoes, because whole Japan is very stupid, and then that's why they do that kind of war, and then not only Japanese maybe, and then whole human beings is stupid. So and then whole to how to say criticize the World War II. So he thinks that the whole human beings has to the kind of metanoesis, So and then he tried to make kind of a collective subjectivity to overcome the kind of situation. So in that sense, somehow I feel that your idea is a kind of bit close to the Tanabe's idea, I feel. So, or I think that it might be out of the point because your idea might be obviously different from Tanabe's, because I'm sorry, I didn't read your book, so I didn't know that point. So if you have some idea about the kind of your position and the Tanabe's position, please let me know. I just want to know. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Satohumi, for your comments. That's what I never thought about. So, as Satohumi explained, Hajime Tanabe is an philosopher in the mid-20s Japan. He somehow supported Japanese World War II policy. And after the war, he regretted his act and started working on the theory or philosophy of regret or zange. How professionals, how scholars translate that zange?
Metanosis.
Metanosis. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And in my understanding, Tanabe's argument is that because we are finite beings, we make mistakes, but we tend to forget about it. That's why we make mistakes. And the important thing is that we need to be very attentive to our susceptibility to our finitude, right? In my understanding, that's the core structure, or that's a point Tanabe tries to make in his theory. So I don't disagree much. Am I correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think
It's
that
been, I think, more than 15 years since I read his book.
Yeah, but I think that you are understanding that it's correct. I think, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. So I don't disagree much about his theory, but I think the problem with theory is that with that theory, he thought he regretted enough about his specific act of war cooperation or war support. Right. So there's actually, I think this your Tanabe's mistake resonates with the points and Kei, Yasmeen, and others make during our discussion, that Tanabe overgeneralizes a specific act of war cooperation into the structure of thought. And by doing so, he somehow lost track of his own stupidity. That's how I felt when I read his book on the meta-analysis. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think that, so I think that I agree with that, he did a kind of overgeneralization, and then and actually I'm also very critical to Tanabe's idea. So yeah, I think that your idea is very convincing, I think. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Casey, Casey Lowe, you said you were... Yeah, Casey, can we see?
So, hi. Yeah, thanks. Well, good morning. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for the wonderful presentations. Well, I have to confess that I haven't read, well, Nobu's book. Well, so that's the reason why I log in, well, to get enlightened. Well, indeed, I get enlightened, well, by all the presentations, well, Kei, well, Woosung and Yasmeen. But in a way, well, I got also frustrated, well, when you somehow kind of try to argue that stupidity is so ubiquitous, well, and so pervasive and is part of the structure, well, then to what degree, well, I guess, well, precisely because I come to get enlightenment, but then while you tell me, oh, stupidity is everywhere and it's part of us and inherent kind of part of our thinking, well, so I'm wondering about, well, the questions, well, kind of to Nobu, but also probably to other speakers, well, somehow to what extent, well, we can somehow kind of develop this concept, well, because, well, whenever we talk about stability, well, while admitting it could be part of us, but at the same time, we also try to alter it to a certain extent, well, by kind of projecting it to the others, rather than, well, we try to learn from this kind of thing, well, in order to get out of it. So while you as you admit, Nobu, that you overgeneralize this concept, but what's the other side of not doing this? What's the possibility of not overgeneralizing it? Rather than, should we just situate it to a particular kind of state, or kind of projecting to the other? Even though what we admit that the other is always part of us. So it's just a very general question, and I try to get a bit more enlightened by this one. Thank you.
Nobu?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Casey, for your comment. So yeah, again, it's about the risk of overgeneralization. As I said, I think the overgeneralization can become tricky when we can only say, well, we are stupid and we need to be aware of it, and that's it. So it's not a good way to fight stupidity, actually. But when I was writing this book, I was concerned that political theorists and scientists, or social sciences in general, including journalism, tend to put too much blame on others instead of reflecting on our own problem. Like, for example, the rise of Trumpism has something to do with Trump supporters and not us, or our problem with the pandemic has something to do with conspiratorial theorists and not us. So I thought there's a certain tendency to assume that the problem is not ours, but theirs. And that is what I try to that tendency of putting blame on others' stupidity is what I was trying to fight against when I was writing the book. But of course, Casey is right that we need to differentiate stupidities, and we need to fight different kinds of stupidities on the different sides, and we need a strategy and tactics for that. That's true. So I'm not sure if I'm responding to your question, but that's what I think.
Thank you. Kai Hiruta?
Sorry, I have to keep my camera off because I just woke up and I'm barely out of my bed. But I'd like to pick up on something that you were talking about, I think about 10 minutes ago, which is that what it used to be an interesting idea, new idea, fresh perspective can become a cliche at some point. And Otobe was saying Bartleby's prefer not to is a cliche now. I do not know the history of this particular idea, but I think this kind of tendency that what used to be a fresh idea, new perspective becomes a cliche is a universal phenomenon. So from my kind of own academic area, as it were, Arendt's banality of evil, I think, has become a cliche. I mean, it can still be used as an interesting perspective to think about something very unique or quite special. But this phrase, banality of evil, which used to be a provocative idea, has become so commonplace by now that it can be applied indiscriminately to everything that might be called evil. And you feel like, you know, this idea has now become a cliche. And you can say something similar about pretty much everything. The veil of ignorance, for example, I think it used to be an exciting idea, at least for some people, but it has become a cliche because it has been repeated ad nauseum by Rawlsians to describe all sorts of things, right? And I think Otobe would say, yeah, that's correct. And that's what he means when he says thinking and stupidity cannot be so clearly separated, they're continuous, or that the original thought and cliche are continuous as well. Now, I agree with that, but I don't think that is quite enough, because we still make a distinction, do we not? When we say, well, this use of the banality of evil is really a good use because it captures something that is rather unique to this phenomenon of evil. And we also say, well, this use of the banality of evil is really a cliched use because it doesn't reveal anything. You're just throwing the term indiscriminately. So we are, on the one hand, at least the readers of Otobe's book are aware that it's impossible to draw a clear-cut distinction between thinking and stupidity. But on the other hand, we still, I think, make a distinction somewhere in our minds between a good use and a bad use, cliched use and non-cliched use. So I'm wondering where the boundaries might be, what the criterion or the standard to distinguish between the good use and the bad use, and I'd like to hear Otobe-san's thoughts on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kei, for your always insightful and stimulating questions. Yes, definitely we can do something more to fight back against cliche without saying everything is cliche. As you said, for example, as you mentioned, in the case of Arendt's banality of evil, we can respond by saying it's not the way Arendt used the banality of evil, and Arendt originally said this in her book on the Eichmann, and so on. And this is one way of fighting against cliche, but still, I think the problem of cliche does not only concern such concepts like banality of evil or value of ignorance or two principle of justice or difference principle and so on, but also our opinions. I mean, our political opinions. So what I find most problematic in our use of cliche is not our tendency to overgeneralize academic notions, but rather our tendency to say to repeat the same opinions on, for example, on Twitter or on Facebook, without knowing it's the opinion of others. So I think that cliche becomes more problematic on a political debates or our actually daily opinions than in academic use of concepts.
Thanks very much.
Yasmeen?
Thank you. I'm really finding this conversation very, really very educational. So thank you, everybody. I wanted to circle back to a couple of things that I think I haven't maybe formulated adequately in my remarks, but also that are coming up for me in this conversation. The first is this idea, and maybe I kind of misrepresented my point about the situatedness of stupidity when I actually meant something like thinking of stupidity as inherently situational. And what I mean by that, maybe this will take me a step further to your definition of politics, drawn from Connolly's, this idea of radical plurality to the very bare bones, basic understanding of politics as the allocation of power, or the question of power and power relationships. And I realized that what I really meant to say is what does, or what would stupidity look like if we factor in, or we always insert it in a field of power? And so the conversation about Bartleby, and I prefer not to, but also the story, the plot as a whole about, you know, the intransigent, you know, of course, the mysterious kind of response, I prefer not to, and then the intransigence to leave the office and all those things. And I was thinking the reason why this response and the reason why even this behavior registered as, I'm not going to say stupid, but incomprehensible, right, is exactly because he was defying, in this particular case, the defying, or I suppose just not playing according to the rules, basically. So as a structure of thought, so to speak, and if we accept that our structure of thought includes, by definition, our sense of how power operates in the various fields in which we are, how then do we read stupidity? I mean, it's clearly not innocent. It's not transparent. It's not just inherent to the thinking process. It's also mediated by the fact that we are always in this relationship of being seen as stupid or engaging in a stupid act.
Thank you, Yasmeen. Your remark reminds me of Deleuze's remark on stupidity. He, in Difference and Repetition, states that tyrant institutionalizes stupidity. And more I listen to your comments, the more I understand that I didn't pay so much attention on the word institutionalizes. So when I was writing my book, I thought, oh yes, it's not only the tyrant, but also the society as such who becomes stupid. And that's one point Deleuze makes in Difference and Repetition. But he also points out the need to pay attention to the institutional side of stupidity, or how stupidity becomes a currency in the world of politics and specific forms of government and specific configurations of power, which I must confess I didn't pay so much attention. And I think, yeah, I need to think more about that. Thank you very much.
It's just striking as really like a fertile direction. It's not so much a lack as in just like an additional layer to consider. Yeah, thank you.
Others? I mean, I do wonder along those lines whether, I mean, if we take the institutional apparatus on the one hand and the situatedness on the other, whether stupidity, at least in these contexts, becomes a condition of being at odds with the institutionalization, right? That there's an institutional logic at work, a structure, a way of being in the world, a condition of being. And stupidity becomes the site or place or condition at which a person, an apparatus, is no longer seen to be functional or sees itself as functional, as operative within that structure of being. So it becomes, in a sense, at odds with that structure of being. and so is seen as, recognized as stupid, as inconsistent with, right? I mean, that sense of a different sense of thoughtlessness is a kind of inconsistency, right? Irrational, given the structure, irrational within that structure, outside of the structure. I mean, that strikes me as a really interesting way to think about it.
Should I respond or
Yeah, I mean, you or anybody else should jump in.
I totally agree with you, David. Yeah.
Others, I mean, we seem to be sort of approaching the end. Does anybody else want to make some comments, or either the panelists?
Can I say something?
Yeah, okay, go.
Yeah, thanks so much, Otobe-san, to respond to my questions. But I'm not convinced yet about democracy. So my question is a little bit close to the Kawamura's Tanabe Hajime's points. When you talk about democracy, you use the word sustain democracy. Yeah? The point of stupidity, the advantage of stupidity is we can sustain our democracy by being stupid. That is one critical point in your book, but it sounds a little bit conservative by using the word of sustaining democracy. Why you can we say radicalizing democracy or deepening democracy by being stupid? Can we say like that? Not only sustain, but also radicalize, deepen, or whatever. Yes, that's my further questions about democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kei. Let me think. I think your point had something to do with our discussion on Bartleby or idiocy. Idiots radicalizes, or idiots pose a radical critique of society or overturns society. And instead of now waiting for an revolutionary idiot, I instead focus on stupid people. I think that's what you try to say. Well, that's not exactly the way you describe it. I think, yeah, I tend to focus much on, I would say, status quo.
Yeah.
More progressivist rather than radical.
That's my impression. Is it right?
Yeah, I think you are right. Well, it doesn't mean that I don't support radical idea.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think radical ideas needs to be introduced and need to be found in our seemingly banal exchanges of cliché. But yeah, you are right that I tend to focus so much on sustaining rather than overturning.
Great. Well, I think we're getting to a point where people are getting on with their day, or we're getting on with our evening. Thank you so much. This is super rich and productive for thinking, and hopefully the first in many more to come. So thank you all for attending. Even though we can't see you, we could see names or numbers, as the case may be. Sort of an ID number. Hang Chang, do you want to say anything? I want to thank our panelists and hello, Oscar. He just sent a little remark of congratulations. And thank you, Hang Chung, for putting the background technology together. So cheers, everybody.